Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. My name is Jennifer Abo, and I'm the head of programs here at AESP. It's such an honor to have you here on the call. As we're waiting for others to join, could you kindly let us know your name and where you're chatting from? We'll be starting the session very soon because we have the panelists on the call already. As we're waiting for others to join, you can use the chat session to introduce yourself. Let us know your name and where you're joining from. We'll begin the session very soon. Thank you so much. I can see some people already introducing themselves. Daniel from Port Harcourt. Welcome, Daniel. Barnabas from Obafemi Awolowo University. Please kindly introduce yourself as we're waiting for others to join the call. We're going to start the session very soon. Hi, Daniel. Welcome to the call. Miracle from University of Nigeria. Welcome. Collins from University of Benin. Welcome to the call. So nice to have you all here. Please, if you're on the call, kindly introduce yourself as we wait for others to join. Abdul, welcome. Welcome to the call. And if you know someone that is not on this call, that planned to attend or did not even hear of this session, you can share the link with them because this is an amazing session that you don't want your friend to miss. It's one of a kind. It's not any type of call that you stumble on the internet. So this is really one of a kind. If you know someone that wants to benefit from something like this, you can share the link with them or send a reminder to them that the session has started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Ifeoma. Blessing. It's amazing to have you on the call. Dr. James Ndukwe, welcome to the call. We are starting very soon. So if you're on the call, if you're just joining, can you just introduce yourself? Let us know where you're chatting from. If you're on the call, introduce yourself. You can use the chat box for that, please. Joshua from Uganda, welcome. Kanayo from the University of Nigeria. Since we have a lot of people from University of Nigeria, welcome to the call. If I missed your name, please don't be angry. I have a lot of people on the chat. So kindly introduce yourself. We'll be starting very soon. Mohammed, welcome. Okay, so it's already 5 minutes after 1. We are going to be moving straight to the session as we allow others to join the call. So just like I said previously, my name is Jennifer, and I'm a graduate of economics, and I work as the head of programs at African Economies Scholars Program. So it's with great honor and pleasure that I welcome you all to the call. And I'm very excited to be here, as you can see, grinning from cheek to cheek. So it's so nice to have you all. It's so nice to be moderating the session. Briefly, I would like to let you know what AESP program is all about. So AESP program, we had our first cohort in 2023, is a program that trains budding young graduates and undergraduates to become the best, in the graduate markets, find their way, find their foot, learn how to be good policymakers, creating policy that work. So that is what we do in AESP. We organize cohort programs, yearly program to train and provide them with the necessary skills to enable them thrive, in the world and become social impact makers and positive change creators in the world. So that is what AESP is all about. And today we have our wonderful guest speaker and facilitator on the call, Miss Aisha Udochi. Without further ado, I'll be reading her profile, then we move straight into the session. So Aisha Udochi is a doctoral candidate in economics at Howard University, concentrating on growth and development theory. She's also the founder of Dow Fay Consults Limited Liability Company, a business development and research consultancy firm, a Sasakawa Peace Foundation Fellow, and a non-resident fellow for the Center for the Study of the Economies of Africa. Recognized for her work on indigenous micro-enterprises, she served as a special advisor to the Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Commissioner for Abia State in 2020, where she led a redesign of the state's industrialization strategy. Her findings were recently published in the Palgrave Handbook of Africa's Economic Sectors. Presently, her research focuses on using financial transactions data to create reliable macroeconomic statistics. Aisha is originally from Nigeria. She has lived and worked in New York, Abuja, London, Beijing, and Boston. Currently, she is based in Washington, D.C. She earned a Bachelor's of Science in International Business and Business Economics from the New York University's Stern School of Business. She holds 2 Masters in Chinese Studies and International Relations from the School of Oriental and African Studies and Harvard University, respectively. Aisha speaks Mandarin and is a devout yoga practitioner. Ladies and gentlemen on the call, it is with great pleasure and honor that I welcome Aisha Udochi to the call. It's such an amazing thing to have you and listen to you on the call. Over to you. And please, a minute. If you have any question for Aisha, you have to please use the Q&A session to ask all your questions. They'll be attended to after the webinar. Thank you. Please go ahead, Aisha.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. To be able to give this sort of talk means a lot, especially at this point in my career, because the topic and the audience is truly, it's a luxury to be able to gather globally together to talk about what it means to be an African economist today. What the work that's being done by AESP, I wish that was around when I first started out my my doctorate program and my other studies, to have a almost like support group and best practices group on how to move forward. But what I want to put forward today is that the skills that are needed in 2024 to be an exemplary economist, to make impact, to create lasting change, is not necessarily by having the slickest CV, because apparently ChatGPT can do that for you. It's not even being able to, I think, execute some of these skills. There are skills that I'll talk about today that I have actually made me more convicted about the importance of these underlying skills and mindsets on how we approach and see our identity as African economists, than just being able to program or create econometric models and things of that sort. All of them are important, but there's something that robots will not be able to emulate. And it's actually really critical as we start creating algorithms that are going to be automating our world, that our input is involved, and that the questions that these algorithms are going to be answering are coming from a wealth of knowledge that includes us, African economists. So I'm going to begin. Another note, typically, I'm used to economic presentations actually taking questions during the presentation. I know that Jennifer, and thank you so much again for your introduction and just moderating and holding this space for us, as well as the other facilitators from AESP. Wonderful job. Thank you so much. But I actually want to be able to take a pause during the presentation to answer questions as I go along. So for sure, just put it in the chat, and every so often I'm going to glance over there and just get some feedback and answer some questions. So I'll begin with sharing my presentation, Commanding Value as an African Economist in Today's Job Market. So the overview is to talk about the current condition, my role, the revelation, and the personal application of these concepts and principles, and I'll finish off with my conclusion. So, what is the current condition that we have inherited as people of Africa? What have we inherited economically? I like to begin here when I'm asking the question about today. What have we inherited from the past? Because the past informs the present. In economics, since the 70s, it has become more scientific, trying to model things of the natural sciences like physics. Has this been to the benefit? Not necessarily to the benefit of the people that these economic abilities are trying to help, not necessarily. What it actually does, and I'll get into this in my presentation, is that it it makes economics more authoritative by having it become more quantitative. But economics is a qualitative and quantitative science, and it's a social science, meaning that we're dealing with people who are imperfect and who are not totally rational beings. So again, we're dealing with models that are not going to necessarily reflect all the nuances of our world, but they provide a general understanding of how things work. Note, and where were these models created? Not in Africa, most of the ones that dictate what mainstream economics is. So that, again, if you have a generalization that is not necessarily coming from a certain place, you're gonna get mixed results, and that's just putting it nicely. They can actually be hazardous and dangerous. And I think we've lived and come from countries where we've been on the receiving end of that. So on International Workers' Day, I appreciate you spending your time here, promoted by the International Labor Organization this holiday. What does it mean to be a good international worker today in 2024? Again, I think that you can go online, you can go to master classes, you can see, you can collect more knowledge. But there has to be a deeper understanding and integration of that knowledge to understand today, what is the best question for me to ask about my community, about my country, about my nation, about what I believe it should look like. We're not in the stage of academia where the workings of how our society needs to be documented. We have so many incredible scholars who have meticulously documented from African to Western, who have documented the progression of where we are today from pre-colonial to colonial and post-colonial times, or post-colonial theory. So so just to review basically what the scholars have put together for us today, is these are some of the big takeaways. One, when we're thinking about what we as African economists have inherited, we have inherited trauma. We've inherited a lot of trauma. So trauma is, if it is severe enough, it can distort our attitudes and beliefs. That may, in the African context, may come up and look like colonial mentality. Such distortions often result in dysfunctional and or resilient behaviors. And I think we can think of that in when we look at a lot of African and Black nations government systems, dysfunctional. But when we think of the resilience of the citizens, that is something that is unmatched. Anybody today in this world knows that people from Black countries tend to really excel when they leave their country and are given opportunities, safety, basic needs to actualize their human potential. So it's, again, not a matter of being ill-equipped or unable to understand. It's, I sometimes kind of say, like, sometimes these countries can be like traps because they abrogate the human potential. as opposed to helping to actualize. But then again, like when you see people leave, then you see, oh, this person got a Nobel Prize. This person is, you're from Africa, but you're the top luger in Russia. We tend to really do well. Recent research in the field of epigenetics has revealed that trauma can actually affect an individual's DNA, and the manifestations of the traumas experienced by prior generations can be passed along genetically to future offspring. So I'm just going to allow a minute for that to sit. But in essence, what our ancestors have experienced in the past, what economists of before have experienced, impacts who we are today down to our DNA. Another critical point about what we have inherited that, again, has been well documented, is a loss of power. So giving an example from colonialism, colonialism meant a tendency towards direct appropriation by Europeans of the social institutions within Africa. Africans ceased to set indigenous cultural goals and standards and lost full command of training young members of society. The decisiveness of this short period of colonialism and its negative consequences spring mainly from the fact that the local people lost power. Again, another intangible concept with real tangible implications and consequences. Power, who has it? And depending on who has it, therefore, what questions are they asking? What are their lines of inquiry? And what do those lines of inquiry serve? Who do they serve? If I'm collecting data on XYZ, why? And for what benefit? And I think oftentimes when you look at the work that has been done thus far, there can be programs and initiatives that sound great, sound high flying, but again, who is it benefiting? And when we look at the local community, are they receiving any overflow from that benefit? Oftentimes, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if that benefit was being spread around, if that benefit was being experienced. What we inherited a hegemony of ideas. So the most pernicious form of imperialism, namely scientific knowledge. Knowledge itself can be a form of imperialism. Predominance of certain ideas at the expense of other ideas is and can be dangerous because it doesn't leave room for diversity of thought and diversity of voice, which is essential to just understanding, again, what are we dealing with? I really like this metaphor of truth being a kaleidoscope, many different lenses, all of them from different angles, maybe different shades and colors, illuminating the same thing, but giving you a different insight into that thing because of the angle and the color and the positioning. That's how academia, that's how, how do I say, mining knowledge, creating knowledge, the production of knowledge should come from, but because of this imbalance through, again, different types of economic structures that did not benefit some people or benefited others at the expense of other groups of people. When I say the expense, I'm talking lives, land, resources, and then even identity. All of these things have been tampered with. So we're inheriting that Western social sciences, whether consciously or inadvertently, foist capitalist values and capitalist development on the rest of the world to serve imperialist ends. Again, not to demonize capitalism, that is another conversation and topic of whether it should be or not, but it's, and you can also say it is harmless, neutral, but when it's used to serve imperialist ends, now we are you literally trying to get the cheapest inputs. You can devalue it, or you can just steal it, to have the most profit. So whether that's in you're constructing or building a country, or you are manufacturing, batteries for cell phones, and you need the lithium from Congo. And so maybe, if we all agree, if we can collectively agree in this economic hierarchy that this is the price, then who some people can benefit at a reduced price. Some people are losing out, but are desperate enough that they're willing to sell it. So these are some of the power dynamics that we're living in today that come from not just because of internal weakened governance structures, but because of the external environment as well. The external environment. And then that leads to, I believe, the last point of what we inherited, which is a devaluation. So the global value chain of the past 500 years was established by the global north and depends on the devaluation of Africa's natural resources. This includes the people and their culture. Malence Bart-Williams, a Sierra Leonean German, during her TED Talk asked, why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth only 1 unit of your currency when we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? These are obvious questions and simple questions that conveniently don't often get answered well. And that's another thing in my academic journey with economics is that I would like to share. Do not deny what your eyes are seeing. You have eyes for a reason. If something isn't adding up in the books, or doesn't make sense to you logically, maybe you're onto something, and it actually might be a good research question. But these are some of the things where the way that our world operates is not in service, particularly of Africa. And in fact, for the past 500 years, a large part of the world has benefited from having Africa circumscribed to the lowest rungs of the production totem pole. So that's our starting place as an African economist. And I just want to pause, take a check. I think that a lot of these ideas that I'm talking about, this intangibility, this, in essence, assault and violence and devaluation is well summed up by Johan Galtung, who is a scholar of peace studies and does really good work on creating terminology and language for violence that is not necessarily just direct. So he talks about cultural and structural violence. It is not uncommon for people being held captive to take on the vibes and the attitudes of their captors. At times, under the stressful conditions associated with being held captive, people can identify so closely with their tormentors that they become like them. Many of us have adopted the attitudes and the views of captors. Many of us see ourselves and our community through a Euro-American lens. We both mold ourselves to accommodate Euro-American prejudices and endeavor to adopt their standards. So that whole psychology of what has happened in the past to people of African descent, to Africa itself, is really indicative or plays a really strong role and influence on, therefore, many different aspects of our society and how we approach them and how we show up. So you can then extrapolate that these prejudices that we then endeavor to adopt, and again, there are external standards out there, like if you are not compliant with international organizations, you'll eventually be kicked out. You'll be considered a pariah state. You are at risk of becoming like a Cuba, being labeled as failed state and not having relations. So that's also the coercion that is at play when we see like, you know, endeavoring to adopt their standards, and why we seek out so much this information so that we know how can I even enter the room. But once the room is entered, because obviously Africans have proved we can enter the room, even if you know, even with all of these barriers, we enter the room. So, but when I enter the room, what standard am I holding? You know, I can enter the room in a certain way to get through the door, but once I'm at the table, now what vantage point am I holding? What interests am I holding? And that's where I think sometimes the science of economics can cloud the social aspect of economics. This is a social science. We are dealing with people. And again, maybe this is something that is comes like logically to you, but it's incredible because from my studies and experiences being in different institutions, from predominantly white to predominantly Asian institutions, that is not necessarily the case. You know, sometimes as scholars, there is a fascination so much with the theory and there's a fascination so much with the discipline that it can elude the fact that the discipline and the theories are meant to affect people and they have real impact and consequences. So again, I'll just say that the way that I see it from, you know, there's so much literature that I again would be happy to share. You know, if you want a list of resources and references, but from just a couple of texts that I've shared that have been really, that I think have been fantastic and great at illuminating our current condition, I would say that our condition today is existential. It is overlapping, it is interconnected, it is immaterial, and it is globalist. We're constantly encouraged to ask questions globally. You know, how does this affect everybody? And again, why does that help to ask that question? It's very simple. When you're working in these institutions, what do? There's maybe a policy or something you need to research stuff. And what are you maybe going to research? Oh, how is this subsidy going to maybe impact trade with another country? Because this outward looking has been so much part of our practice of economics since the 70s. And again, it's not necessarily because that is the better thing to do, but the times dictated that by the 80s, there was a big push towards globalization. In the Euro-American space, so this is the Margaret Thatcher era in the UK and the Ronald Reagan era in the US. So it's all about big money spending, efficiency, just on time production. Oh, we can have a business in the US, produce in China, get it shipped through Singapore and have it back to us. You know, that's how, and to today, that's how a lot of businesses operate. I will say this, in 2020, I really thought that we were going to rethink the way we organize our societies and we organize our economies, because there were glaring vulnerabilities to the way we structure doing business with collecting the cheapest materials that you can from around the world, including, of course, the region of Africa, and producing it in the US or producing it maybe in China and then having it shipped back. So you know, you have all these consumer goods for your population. But in doing so, what the US right now is experiencing because of that is there were major supply shortages due to COVID and literally things just not being shipped out in order to contain the pandemic. And what that resulted in was a contraction in supply and then a increase in demand and inflation. So currently they're saying that we're in a recession, and a lot of people have been really negatively affected by that, especially because the living wage has not increased over time. So we're in a tight condition, we're in a tight space, and that is when they tend to say whenever like the US or the UK has the cold, the rest of the world gets the flu. So if I'm saying, oh, it's bad conditions, people, the price of the cost of living has not caught up with the cost or the living wage, you can imagine then how other countries are doing. So what does it mean to be an African economist? What is my role? If I know all of these things, and I personally like to label myself as an Afro-economist. It has that term has a history from like the 60s. But if you think of the 60s in Africa, what is that? A time of liberation, a time of exploring national identity, creating identity, and I think a time of looking inwards. So I thought in COVID, we were going to look inwards. This clearly isn't working. It's not sustainable. Even I'm talking about macroeconomy, but even on the micro level, and again, probably for another conversation on all of those things at the micro level that is not working. But yeah, at the micro level, you could see a lot of things were not working. It was incredible to see also how in the developed nations it was the angel of death. Oh, I want to say the angel of death. People were dropping. People were dropping. And again, I think it speaks not only to the veracity of the pandemic, but to the conditions of the people who are not able to withstand that sort of illness. And obviously, if you're immunocompromised or elderly, that's one. But the younger people were getting it too. And lives were lost, and people who if you're in your 50s and your 40s. So again, to me, that says we need to reevaluate. So bringing it back to what does it mean to command value as an African economist? Where do what is and what will / could be intersect? So I'm thinking again about more imagination, more creativity of what could be, and how that's really important with merging that with what currently is. I will get into that. And where are the potential spaces for radical reimagination? I'll talk with the moderator. I see a question about sharing slides, so I'll talk with the moderator about getting those slides out to participants. Thank you. So my role as an African economist, I have found, is to commit to a journey within. So again, I could give a talk. I could talk to you about the textbooks, the programs that I've been to, the conferences, the fellowships. All these things were helpful in getting me experience. Doing a doctorate is kind of like an apprenticeship. So it's like all these things were helpful in apprenticing as an economist. But there's another aspect to this. And I want to say this is the human aspect. Yes, I can collect all this knowledge and I can execute it, but I am a person from somewhere that these tools are meant to help. I'll pause here and give a little story about myself, and again, why I really believe that economics can be used for change. I'm a third generation economist, and I grew up between Oguashi in Delta State and Maryland in the US. And my grandfather is an economist and a demographer statistician, and the traditional ruler of Oguashi. So he would say, we can, coming to his role as the traditional ruler, he was bringing economic and scientific thinking to that role in order to make change. And I've seen him make those changes. So growing up, I remember when he would talk about building a dam. That dam is here today. That dam supplies power to the community. Talking about farms, piggeries, talking about soy farms, things that were relevant to the community. And I saw him, I remember, being at the table, talking about it, inviting people to collaborate, to fund, to make this happen. So I've seen how these projects can make a difference in a community, and how this sort of forward thinking is necessary to see, we can have a dam, we can supply our own power, as opposed to the overarching narratives of poverty. Well, oh, we're just too poor. Oh, we don't have enough. Oh, the people aren't smart enough, which is beyond. Because again, I've seen Africans excel incredibly with a lot less resources, and in competitive situations, conferences. So again, just trying to dispel that idea that, oh, maybe there's something that we don't know. And anything that you don't know, you can ask at this point, you can ask an AI, you can ask a chat GPT and find out, but it's what you do with the knowledge. And I have a mentor who is the owner of Africa Data Foundation that I'm associated with. And he even says that we no longer live in the age of information. We're past the age of information. So again, this integration of information and skills as an African economist is what needs to be contemplated. And it can only be contemplated when I sit with myself, when I look with my eyes, and I say, what is the most relevant question and forward-thinking question that I can imagine and carry out for my community, for where I'm from, that is useful. So to the point, commit to the journey within. Internal problems require an internal solution. So just shifting, when I think of my community, the town where I partly grew up, that's and the issues that are there, and the socioeconomic issues, those are internal problems, and they require an internal solution. I am better off going around on foot, understanding the landscape, looking at where needs are not being met, thinking innovatively about how those gaps can be filled, than going to, I think oftentimes we search for answers externally, partly because of the things that I have laid out prior, but it doesn't serve. It doesn't serve. And again, COVID, that was an opportunity to look internally and to redesign your economic structures and way of doing business. We went back to business as usual. I do not think that that is sustainable, especially the asterisk is I study China, so I see what they're doing. And it is the future. It's very dangerous when you become complacent. And so that's, again, another conversation of geopolitically, this double hegemony that has emerged between the US and China, and how that's going. But at the end of the day, in me studying that, that's what I noticed. There's a lot of things that are being overlooked. There's a lot of resting on laurels and living in past glories and not adapting to the current times. And for Africans, that could actually be to our benefit. Being able to meet together, being able to share ideas in ways and at a speed that is unrivaled to this time. So Marcus Garvey said, a people without the knowledge of their past history and origin and culture is like a tree without roots. Again, speaking to this journey within. You can learn the skills. It's what you do with those skills, what you do with your history, what you do with your culture, that is going to either radicalize those skills or make you kind of impotent. And again, I think what will differentiate us, because it's 2024, because we talk a lot about automation and the robotization that's happening across different industries. It is critical to think deeper than a robot, because they're even programming these robots with feelings. I don't know if some of you guys on here study AI because of my or do data science, but because of my doctorate project, I have had to learn how to code, and I've gotten into data science. And so a lot of these things are new to me, but I've been shocked by the speed that we're moving and the adoption rate that we have. So these are the things that, to differentiate yourself, to give you value, and then again, be of use. It's critical to be looking within. So the theoretical framework for this journey within as an African economist is this post-globalist agenda, self-integration, a mind reformation, and to become a possibilitist. So I don't know if this is in order here. Again, so this post, we're going in order. I'll just try to link it back. But one concept, it comes from a Yoruba term called ogboninu, and it talks about the knowledge of the gut. So knowledge of the gut is also considered to be knowledge of the gods. It's you know, kind of in the Western words, it can be called emotional intelligence, and in some other traditions they'll call this intuition. And why, again, this is the differentiating factor between the chat GPT and you. A chat GPT can run a regression, just so you know. So, you know, what is going to differentiate you from that? And why won't a company just hire a program over you? Because you know something, you have integrated something, you have intuition about something, that this is critical, that this is the right question to ask, that this is the right way to go about it, because of your lived experience. Our lived experiences in economics, oftentimes in academia and economics, you want to sound objective. You eliminate the author. So in a lot of these texts, it sounds very prescriptive. And I guess, and then in that sense, you can say it sounds more quote unquote scientific. But in eliminating the person, if you're doing that in your writing, can you imagine the effect that has on you and your thinking and your interaction and engagement with the world? So scientifically and anatomically, we actually have 3 hearts. So if you're only using your head, like basically like what the AI does now, you're at a disadvantage. You are better off learning how to train yourself to also understand the brain of your heart, which is actually electromagnetically thousands of times stronger than your head, than your brain. And that from the figure that governs your emotions, your memories, your images, your visions, and your dreams. That's really important. That's really key. I'll just touch again on the gut. Directly engage with the world. It's instinct, intuition, unself-conscious, immediate, practical, and direct. So again, why that is important is one theme I've found, especially in studying development, is that the discourse likes to emphasize, especially in African contexts, poverty. And it likes to emphasize all the stories of extreme poverty that you know, that are great for fundraising. Help a child, feed a child a day, put shoes on a child in Sudan, help a mom start a business in Namibia. You know, these are real people. These are real constituents of our society. but they're not the only ones. And I have actually found that it could be considered even a psychological warfare to only predicate development conversation on poverty, because when you're operating from the premise of poverty, you are only going to reap poverty. It's pretty logical, but it's also kind of like when I was looking and seeing, so this has been going on since the 1800s, since before the colonial era, when they were explorers who came to Africa and started documenting things and saying that, malaria and the malaria nets. And a lot of the strategies that are being used today are not new. They literally come from the late 1800s, and they are not yielding the sorts of results that as African nations we would want to see. They're not yielding the results, because if they were yielding the results, we would not have this sort of flight from different countries, lack of opportunities, massive unemployment, et cetera, jobless growth. So the heart and the gut are critical, and engaging those, because it allows you to imagine past poverty. It allows you to imagine past poverty. It allows you to imagine something bigger potential. So as I'm talking about this, there's a lot of different topics that I'm touching on that makes this probably not as expected as you might have thought from the title of what it means to command value. But part of commanding value is knowing your value and knowing where you are from, situating yourself and locating yourself in history so that you know how to act today. So if it is too big, my consciousness is too small. I think this is yes, yeah, exactly. So key axiom, and sorry about that. I think I pressed, okay, here we go. Yeah, key axiom. So for this journey within, if it is too big, if what I'm thinking of is too big, my consciousness is not at the level to handle what is trying to make itself material to me, or these new ideas, these bigger ideas. My consciousness may be too small. So that is part of the work, expanding my consciousness, my ability to believe in greater possibilities. And there are a lot of examples that I've seen personally and with people I know, where I've watched this consciousness expand and the odds be defied. And again, who are defying the odds? Africans. And who really, so yes, there are unscrupulous people. Yes, there are people who want to totally reinstate the colonial times and blah, blah, blah. But in this space, there are also just scholars who are genuinely curious. And I have found that when I present some of these ideas, or when I say I'm going to carry out this project and they're like, oh, that sounds impossible, I don't think you're going to be able to do it, and then I do it, everybody's hungry for this information. Because if you are truly committed to the practice and the study of economics, or just the study of knowledge in general, you want as much information and truth as possible so that you can construct your reality, so that you can better understand your reality. So when you present these things, when you ask questions that have not been answered, or when you probe at questions that have been answered but do not reflect your reality, now we're starting to really contribute to discourse. It may, I mean, nobody likes having maybe their project replicated and you get a different result, but that is part of the scientific and academic process. And I assure you that if more Africans were doing research on questions relevant to their community, groundbreaking work. We can talk probably at another time about the barriers of actually promoting that work and getting it seen in other countries and things like that. But at the end of the day, my experience has been shock, awe, excitement about these topics, because people aren't asking these questions, or they're taking it at face value. Oh, McKinsey already did a study on this. This must be true. But McKinsey is a for-profit business. So whatever they're presenting, yeah, they have, you know, the products look great, the pamphlets look great, the presentations are first class. I have a lot of friends who work at McKinsey, but they will tell you it's for profit. They get paid well. It's consulting. I'm selling you a business opportunity, perhaps in Africa. One of my projects actually was challenging McKinsey finding that Africa was the next factory of the world, and particularly just looking at one business in particular, Nigeria, a shoe manufacturing business in Ikorodu Estate in Lagos. And I was basically studying Chinese involvement in Nigeria's shoe manufacturing, because what people profit on are as outsiders, observing where you're from, seeing an opportunity, going back to Germany, going back to the US, going back to England and saying, hey, there's an opportunity here. If you're a business, if you get into this market in Uganda right now, when it comes to chickpeas, you got it. Because I mean, you can manufacture here, ship it there, you have steady electricity, or you know, partner with somebody there. And because you have capital and access to the capital at home, maybe in Germany or wherever you have access to financial markets, you now can pump capital into your greenfield investment in Uganda, making chickpeas, and then dominate the market, and essentially maybe even have the whole market. If you're producing in mass, you know, you can have larger margins through volume. So these are the things that are at play and are at stake when we're just taking what is given to us at face value. We are participants in refining and adding to the knowledge. Remembering my future. I like this concept because I am remembering what can be. I'm remembering what is possible. I'm remembering all of the resources and value that is present and what I can do with that. And part of this is, yes, it's important to acknowledge the past, to understand my present, but we also have to spend time remembering a future. And please make it a future that you want to live in. Not these futures of, okay, if I just can, you know, get aid from this country, or if I can just, where you're still operating in the poverty sort of mindset of what can I get? What can I get? What about what can I generate? I've seen it, and there's already indigenous ways of industrial organization that we have. This again was from my research on the shoe manufacturing industry. I for that project, I also went to Aba and spent time with the shoemakers there and learning about how they produce and compete with a mass manufacturer in Lagos who creates flip-flops that are ubiquitous around the country and that are the lowest price on the market. How do you compete when you're a hand maker, when you make your shoes by hand? These are the questions that, and these are the projects that I think open up more possibility of what economic inquiry can be for where I'm from. Many ripples become a wave. And then the advantage of thinking like this, approaching your work like this, and then connecting with like-minded people. Some people you may look at this approach and think, oh, this is unrealistic. I don't have time to be contemplating this. I need the job. Okay, cool, fine. This probably is not for you, because ultimately we have serious problems to solve. A lot of us here are able-bodied. A lot of us at least have the resource to have electricity and light to log on here. We can do something. Many ripples become a wave. That's why I don't get, I personally don't get deterred when it's like, oh, it's just one or two people, because many ripples become a wave, literally. John F. Kennedy said that. It's, and it fuels me, because also when I examine on development projects that have been successful, oftentimes it's those small ones, it's those grassroots ones that are adding to people's lives, that are not just taking for some shiny report for more funding from a Western NGO. Like, it is these very small grassroots examples that you could call ripples that collectively are a way for a new way of thinking and approach to economics, and particularly to African development. I'm gonna just pause here and have a sip and check the chat. Okay, let me get this question here from Kenya. I believe that this conversation, as you rightly put, it should eventually only make sense if and when a solution is found internally as a community whose eyes are open and feet firmly on the ground with innovative ideas. I urge you to come together with a group of like-thinking African economists and guide us all and guide us. Tall order. This is just a comment, not a question. Thank you, Jane. And I mean, depending on when this came through, I agree. I believe that's what it takes. And that's, again, why it's really important to have spaces like AESP of like-minded people who are willing to go. I mean, you can get a good job, but you can do so much more. You can get a good job and you can make an impact. You can get a good job and you can inspire people that there is more available. You can get a good job and, it's not always, not everything is mutually exclusive. And I think, again, those are some of the beliefs, even in economics, that it's a zero-sum game. It really isn't. It really, really isn't. Again, another conversation, some of the things that I learned at Howard, which is a predominantly Black institution, historically Black institution, and why that was really important for me to go there is because, surprise, surprise, the way that these Black scholars interpret the same journal articles is different. And it's different, and it's necessarily so because they are people with different experiences, with different lens. So as part of the kaleidoscope, they're adding. It's not that they're wrong, and it's not necessarily that these other ideas are wrong, but they're adding more context. So it's critical that these questions are solved internally. So how do I go about this journey within? I have there's economic texts. I've mentioned some at the start, and then of course textbooks. And again, I'm happy to share works cited and references on some of the economic texts that have been really useful and helpful through my studies. This has to be coupled with personal work. I want to see, okay, yeah, this has to be coupled with personal work. So, and a lot of these texts, even the thought of sitting down to read these texts when we live in such a hyper-productive society, it can feel useless. It can feel like a distraction. But I want to put forward that it is the most important foundation to radicalizing and strengthening your economic work. For sure, hands down. I mean, one, especially if you go on the track of doing a master's or doing a graduate degree, or even doing your undergrad or doing a terminal degree, there is the literal wherewithal you have to have mentally to get through this. That requires personal reflection and work. If you even want to be an economist and hold the degree, you have to finish the degree. That takes an inner fortification. So that was one of the things that I, again, saw differentiated me from some of my classmates and my approach to the program and studying. But I'm really grateful that I held true to it, because I'm happy to say one of the statistics that they give is at least in the US, over 50% of doctorate students are depressed. I didn't want that to be me. So that's literally part of doing the work, the inner fortification to to walk that journey and to, you know, be the apprentice. And then there is the reflection that comes from questioning the fundamental basis of our economic structure, which should happen. It should happen. Even when you think of cars, eventually you go and you get your car serviced. You add oil, you check this, that, and the other. These things have to happen. I think that now is a really opportune time to do that because of the resources that we have available, specifically the digital resources, the electronic resources that we have available. So just to read, refusing productivity and redirecting my attention to active modes of listening and contemplation by shining a critical light on the ways in which my identity has become reduced and entangled with my occupation, I shatter this delusion and practice modes of reclaiming the power of my own curiosity. So in that statement, I'm speaking to a couple of things. I'm speaking to this detangling of only associating myself with, from the previous slide, with my brain. And I'm activating the connection with the world through my gut and with the world through my heart, which inspires vision, being able to see what is not there, which some might say is faith. You know, all of these things are critical to your humanity. And your humanity is important because why? Again, this is a social science. This is a social science. So we're dealing with people. If you want to have if you want to ask effective, potent questions that people care about, there should be some understanding of people. And that takes time. It takes observation. It takes quiet. It takes stillness. All of these things which sound not productive to being an economist, but again, I argue that it is essential and foundational. I mean, yeah, again, a robot at this point could be an economist, but what's going to make you an economist that, again, has impact, inspires, asks needed questions. And again, I say this with so much like urgency and like fervor because my experience is that we really, really need these questions answered. We need better questions because sometimes they say there's no such thing as a bad question. And I agree with that, but there are such things as really good questions where it's like, oh my God, that question just opened up a lot, or it opens up a whole new avenue of possibility for you. And if it opens up for you on a micro level, and again, if the many ripples become a wave, it can open up a whole dimension for a nation. And we need that. So revelation on power. What is the relationship between design and power? How can we identify and anticipate violent tactics and develop a critical view towards systems of domination? Let's see what we have here. Power is the ultimate determinant in human society, being basic to the relations within any group and between groups, as well as within any person and between persons. It implies the ability to defend one's interests and, if necessary, to impose one's will by any means available. In relations between peoples, the question of power determines maneuverability and bargaining, the extent to which a people survive as a physical and cultural entity. And when one society finds itself forced to relinquish power entirely to another society, that is itself a form of underdevelopment. Love this quote, love Walter Rodney. He's also a SOAS alum, author of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which is an economic history book. So I love this statement because one of the things that I have come across in my studies of development and growth theory is that development, yes, it happens on the macro level. There's also a difference between development and modernization. Just building a stadium isn't development. Development is about like increasing accessibility to opportunities for people, improving quality of life. So the stadium is cool, but it's not necessarily development. But so you have development at a macro level, and then you have development at the micro level. So even again, when people say, oh, this sounds too lofty, start with yourself. I cannot tell you, in me committing to this, I also feel I like to call myself an unrepentant optimist, because I have seen people defy the odds, clinch opportunities, make impact in their community. Individuals, people my age, people younger than me, people older than me, still working to serve their community and make they make where they're living a better place to be. Having that interest. And so the development is not just on this macro level where I'm studying an economy and how to reduce their debt burden and this, that, and the other and calling it development. It's happening here. That's why I listed these books. It can feel unsettling to maybe see a title that says rest is resistance when we're talking about economics, self-care when we're talking about economics, how to do nothing when we're talking about economics. Very good book, How to Do Nothing. Because a lot of what this presents is there are so many rich things that I gather that improve my research, that improve my ability to conduct it, that improve the like even me being able to complete a 3-year project. You know, these books help with that, but they also help me rethink how my rethink economic organization. Because what happens if I center the person, if I have a human design or human centered designed economy where I'm valuing the person and I'm considering their actualization, knowing that if I invest in the person, human capital development, we all benefit. So that's also the funny thing. When I sit down and I reflect and I work on these other aspects of myself, my other two brains, my heart, my gut, learning how to interpret the information that it's communicating to me, this body that we have, again, it's electromagnetic, it's receiving information, all the time. And again, we don't take that into account. And kind of to link it back to one of the other points I made about this being an existential, like we're dealing with an existential condition or problem, is that how do you solve an existential problem? Is it by building another factory or building a stadium? An existential problem like climate change or human rights violations or unemployment that is creating a disillusioned class of young people, which isn't good for any society, by the way. To sap the hope from its young people, not a good move, especially for the men. It's gonna become a real problem. So it's another way of thinking of what happens if I don't engage with a USAID representative, and instead I look internally in my community. So maybe it's not as grand and things like that, but what happens when I look at my resources that I have within myself, within my community, locally? I'm looking within. That's what I think a lot of these books and exercises and even spiritual texts teaches us to do, that actually benefits the sorts of questions that we as economists need to ask today in 2024. So just to talk again about power and systems of domination. I mean, you get up close and personal with this, obviously, in a lot of African nations where there's a disproportionate amount of power, especially with political elites. And then you see it also when you go off to the land of milk and honey. the US, the UK, roads paved with gold is what like friends might say back home. Oh, you get to go to Canada or whatever. But what I've observed in these societies, and then again, from the perspective as an African economist, is that there is an architecture of power. And if you look at them and you analyze the intention of the rule makers, who they are, what is impacting the rules, the hierarchies and classifications that are introduced directly or indirectly, and more critically for me, who are the rule takers, because typically that is going to be the rest of the world, which is everywhere else except Europe and the in North America, or really want to say like Canada, US. So, you know, if I'm a rule taker, how do I shift my power? How do I retain more power? How do I grab more power for myself? And again, why? For the preservation of my community. When a society loses the ability to command and direct its own youth population, it's on the border of like extinction, a culture. So these things are, the stakes are high, to put it lightly, and systems of domination, reflecting upon the rules, what rules tell us about society and the authorities they serve, who and what do the rules inadequately protect, and how do these rules contribute to invisibilizing or distorting relationships and self-concept? I think all of these are fantastic questions. I could go on. I kind of talked about it earlier, but these are things to consider. And even if you're doing your analysis, like for a certain type of project, these are great questions. I really love how I was taught that sometimes a good question is what wasn't asked, because there's a reason for that. And it can only make an argument more robust when you are, presenting both sides. Okay, this is what was asked. What wasn't asked? Why wasn't it asked? And does that legitimize my question more, or does it take away from my question? And when it comes to even like this architecture of power, I have a simple answer and an approach to all of this. It's retaining power, generating power, I believe begins at the micro level, begins with you as an African economist, and it is built up. So that's kind of how I see combating and living within systems of domination. And what I like about it is that it returns the power back to me. I'm not waiting on the World Bank to hire me. I'm not waiting for my local government chairperson to make this change. I'm not waiting. I am discovering the power that I have within myself. And I am looking critically at the world around me. And I'm believing that me asking a question about my little community is going to be the hottest thing and the most revolutionary thing that a lot of these econ circles are going to come across. I know whenever I give a presentation on my research, for example, a lot of people are interested because it's a topic that most people are not asking, or even thinking that it's possible to ask or to complete that project, especially at the scale that I'm on, which is as an independent researcher. So personal application. How can we develop inclusive and equitable practices that promote collective flourishing, centering our most vulnerable and precious people? How do I design Africa as an economist? And a note with this, I mentioned how a lot of the narratives in development are centered around poverty, and how that can also be like a psychological warfare by only directing anything relevant to development has to do with poverty in the African context, because that alone limits what is possible in terms of the questions that I can ask, the possibilities for resolution and solutions, policy. And I say that again because it's so funny to me how most people who are like myself, maybe like, have a higher education, middle class, or middle income, are not talked about. And I'm already giving you another idea because I plan on doing some research on this out of my current project. Do research on middle income people. If you want to be a African economist that's commanding value, I'm giving you a freebie right here, because nobody talks about middle income people. And I would also say that if you're thinking geopolitically, and we talked initially about the mind influence, the psychological influence that a lot of like the colonial era and current ways of being are, and the ways of being that came out of that impact how we are. We're not, so you're telling me I should only research farmers and fertilizer, and I should only research poor mothers and children. I should have researched people like me. I should have researched, does it make sense? People like me who have a little bit of discretionary income to actually spend in the economy, but you want me to research the person who can't move the needle on the consumerism odometer, who can't, you know what I mean, who's living $1.90 a day. It's important work. There's been a lot of work. I also would say maybe not the results that we're looking for totally. So perhaps I should research the people who have the education and a little bit of money and opportunity, and see how then I can or what policies, what work, what information can I give insight on to inspire more work on this, so that people, everyday people who are trying to the regular thing, get the job, maybe build a house back home, things like that, these things can be done. So how do I design Africa as an economist? So for me, I want to focus on people like me. I don't think that that's because also that's what I know more about. I know more about friends who are finishing school, who are academics or scholars like me, who are maybe even leaving the country for other job opportunities and things like that. Or they're starting a family, and because of the way Nigeria is, they said, I have to get a stake to Canada. That is what I think more research should be done on if we're going to talk about actual growth and development in Africa. So this is personal application. So Hippocratic oath that's typically in the medical field is first, do no harm. And I really believe this also should be applied to social scientists. Because again, what we do, it has an impact and it has implications. So the work that I'm going to talk about is invites us to take statistics as the object of study and no longer bypass them. The deconstruction of statistics enables us to consider to what extent and under what conditions they can be at the service of power and domination. So that's one of the dimensions and outcomes of the research, is also exploring through this deconstruction of statistics why the statistics were constructed the way they were, and who does it serve by having the statistics constructed this way. Because again, statistics, as probably a lot of you know, there's a lot of room to make statistics tell different stories. I mean, they're numbers, so it's critically how you interpret them, and it's also how you construct them. How did you come to that number? And here, are poor numbers a problem unique to Africa? No, this is an issue in statistics and economics in general. There are lies, damn lies in statistics. And it's just a cartoon, it's a joke. So we're looking for someone who can make all three of these work for us. Obviously, in the African context, we don't need any more lies. We just need honest work with integrity that's asking useful questions that can actually enlighten us to strategies for growth and development. So I know I have part of my presentation as included in this, but I want to just again take a pause, check for questions, and see where we're going here. Oh. Okay. Oh, I'm just seeing the note on time. So I thought that this was going until to the top of the hour. So can I just get some feedback on how much time do we have, or are we actually out of time? You can message me or just tell me over the mic.
Hi, Aisha. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we have about 15 more minutes to go.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I think with that, I'll just glide over my presentation, but some critical facts again. If we're just gonna take Nigeria, for example, the population of Nigeria by 2050 will outstrip the US. And by 2050, 1 in 4 people in the world will be from Africa, from the continent. So again, we are at a really interesting time, and we're at a time that is not the time of our parents. We're at a paradigm shifting time, and multiple scholars, industry representatives and consultants have said this. This shift that has come, as I said, we're no longer in the information age. We are also at this like AI data science, like who's going to control the data sort of battle. So and then we're also at a time where we can benefit right now. The average person can benefit right now at a very low price or low cost with these sorts of new technologies and electronic products. So I'm thinking of things like Zoom. This sort of access, who knows, it may not be like this forever. Delivery apps, sharing economy sorts of things. So we're still at a time where the consumer is benefiting. So these are some of the aspects of what makes this time particularly unique. Again, this is my presentation, part of my presentation I wanted to share, but let's see. Oh, okay. So I kind of want to leave it at that because I want to hopefully have a little bit of a back and forth. But final thoughts and recommendations. I've said a lot, and I've skewed the conversation away from, what's the best fellowship? Where can I search for grants? How should I construct my CV? To you as a person, because that is what I've seen is the most valuable thing that Africans can add in any organization that they're working in, or if they are, if you're starting your own independent organization. It is your life experience. And for a lot of people in the world, people often say, oh, I travel so much. I've been all around the world, and they'll name places. I've been to Melbourne. I've been to Toronto. I've been to Paris. I've been to maybe if they're like, if they think they're really worldly, I've been to Bangkok. Have we mentioned any African city? But this is the thing. This is where you can have a comparative advantage, huh? Because if you know yourself and if you know where you are from, not only can you become an expert in that, not only look, I enjoy learning about where I'm from, and I enjoy learning about myself. And I personally, I believe very much in the quote by Socrates, the life unexamined is not worth living. I've operated by that since I was in secondary school. When I first heard the quote, it made so much sense to me. And I think that premise, that idea is operationalized throughout different aspects of my life, and it yields good results. I like even the fact that I'm able to talk to people who I can relate with, and who can gain something from this this topic of what it means to be an African economist, hearing from what I've observed during my journey. That means a lot. That adds to my satisfaction as an African economist, and it adds to my fulfillment in doing this sort of work. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be thinking that way if I said, I need to be seen by the IMF. I need to be seen by Goldman Sachs, or they need to hire me for a talk or something like that. And I'm so fixated on this external world that has historically used and exploited and taken from where I'm from and from the people that inhabit where I'm from. So when I'm thinking about creating a new future, remembering a future that I actually want to live in, that begins with me centering myself. Know thyself, know what lights you up. That is likely what and where you can facilitate change more effortlessly and effectively. You all play a role. Know yours. Be highly intentional about your thoughts. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. And then surrendering to the process. The vision is the North Star. The vision is the guide. The process of following it is where the healing, the restoration, and the regeneration take place. So when we're talking about that development and that growth, the pro tip, and this is the thing, and this is from what I have learned from studying and building myself, fortifying myself personally, is that the slower you go and the more intentional and deliberate you are, the faster you will arrive at your vision and your desired results. The faster you will see the change within yourself and thus the world around you, because again, your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So a lot of this is getting into the almost like metaphysical heart of being an economist, and the value that African economists bring. Obviously we have the skills, but now we're competing with robots. What differentiates me? What differentiates me? And that requires, as I've been saying through the presentation, this stillness, this reflection, this looking within. You can continue to do what has been done and you can get those same results, or you can imagine more for yourself and experience it and achieve it. And personally, again, I've worked on incredible projects with people virtually and in person when I was living in China, when I was living in Boston, coming together with the like-minded Afro-centered people. There is nothing like it. There is nothing like it. The condition of Black people today is that we're dispersed all around the world. So that's where I see like this virtual meeting and collaboration as super critical to bridging these gaps and exchanging this information, engaging in knowledge transfer with each other. But that's also where you can actually probably experience this global impact, because we are all around the world. So many people benefit from the African experience and what we bring to the table. And a lot of these things have conveniently been devalued, but they're very valuable. Culture, music, food, literature, maths, sciences, arts. Oftentimes, like especially in the US, they'll say that American culture actually is Black culture, African culture, because that's where the Black people are from. So just to say, we have so much to give. I want to continue this conversation. Dalfe has recently launched an early career advisory services where we're doing specifically for AESP, an early bird pricing for that program. It's 4 weeks. It's going to be live. It's going to be interactive. And I want to get into greater depth a lot of the topics that I couldn't touch on, or that I couldn't go into detail in, but I might have touched on in this conversation. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. You can put in an inquiry via the site. You can email me directly. I will leave my my email, but this is a sort of work that I really think that African economists really need to do, because we're trying to get results. We're actually trying to build our communities and improve where we're from, so that we don't have to be job buying and leaving and living in Babylon and some foreign lands when we have these beautiful countries. So I that's why I see this as extremely urgent for Africans. But honestly speaking, even when I look at my peers and that are also in economics programs across the US and across the world, and like their approaches, not all of them are Black or African, but I honestly think that to survive in economics today, if you want to have an exciting career, if you want to have a meaningful career, because again, like they said, 50%, over 50% of doctoral students are depressed. If you want to have a fulfilling and happy career, it requires more than just reading the books and the skills. It requires embodiment of these ideas and an integration. And that integration takes into consideration where I come from and where I am today. So again, more information, visit dalfe.org, reserve your seat. I would love to see a lot of you here. And thank you so much for your attention. I'm sure that this was not what you were expecting, but the times call for the unexpected. And I think that there's enough information that has preceded us to tell us that there needs to be a shift in our approach when it comes to development. And that, again, to put it simply, the development begins with you, Yeah, so I definitely see my program as a great way to begin that self-investment and that self-development. So, thank you again for allowing me to share this with you. It's really, truly a sacred space to be able to come and talk with people who share the same background as me, and to be able to talk about my experience as an economist, and the direction that I see things going. So I'm just checking the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you so much for the session. It was really mind-blowing. Just like you said, it was more than expected. Thank you so much. We are very excited to have you on the session. So some people have been asking questions on Q&A. Okay.
Yes, and I want to get to that. I'm just seeing it now, and I'm also okay. Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
So Nobodo has asked, oh, and happiness. Jen Sincero is a delight. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yes, and that's just again speaking to that this process of self-development as part of macroeconomic development actually can be enjoyable and fun. And a lot of it has to do with relinquishing the beliefs that have been imposed on us. And again, a lot of that comes from those systems of domination, but it is your duty. It is your duty, I think, if you want to actualize your human potential, to do that work. It's not just in acquiring the knowledge. We live in a post-knowledge era. Chat GPT, they have all the answers. Even me, I'm a late adopter, and even I use Chat GPT like once a week. So Nobodo said, the social violence you spoke about affect entry into economics job markets sometimes, even more subtle than meet the eye. For example, recently there was an uproar on Twitter because of a post by Paul Graham pointed to the fact that he considers the use of some big words in an email or letter, even the ones that are considered common in Nigeria, as evidence of the work of being AI generated. How do we navigate the economics job market with these barriers? Are we expected to pass, to enter, and become more honest to our true selves once we've gained entry? The practice of being honest to yourself begins before you get the job. I don't know how you're going to be honest to yourself if you weren't practicing this beforehand. You can obviously do that there, but exactly when even your vernacular sounds, now they're claiming that it's AI generated. And Paul Graham, I believe, is American. If you're Nigerian, you speak the Queen's English. So there's a lot of terms that Americans don't even use, even though they both speak English. So these are ways of dismissing Africans. How do you mean AI generated? Because you use words that have more syllables than American English. So absolutely, these are the sorts of cultural violences that people face just to get through the door. How do I navigate this in the economics job market? So when it comes to the job market, that is a whole that's a whole nother approach. And I personally do have an approach on that. Again, for a job that I like, that I'm going to gain skills that is going to help me, and it's going to be a stepping stone, something that's fulfilling and things like that. Because yes, it is possible for me to get a job that pays me and that actually invest in me as well, invest in the skill set that I need, invest in the research questions that I'm interested in, and that I know that I have a comparative advantage in executing. So I would begin the first thing with the job market is I would begin with knowing what you have to offer first and foremost. Because part of this, it will be interesting if I begin with casting a really selective net and then casting a wider net. So instead of doing the 100 job applications, I get really clear on what it is that I'm trying to learn how to do, what job can help me learn how to do that, because I have an agenda as an African, and I need to learn certain things and have access to certain things in order to progress that agenda according to my research and findings. And so so I'm using them too. You're using me, I'm using you. We have to know, if I'm navigating the job market, I need to know what is it that I'm trying to get. And yes, it can be as simple as I need to work for ODI in the UK because I think that's going to look really good for me, or people who have gone before me have done X. At the same time, yeah, so knowing what you need to gain is critical. And then at the same time, do not shirk these spaces. Do not shirk these spaces. I don't know spaces like AESP. It's not common, especially the size of the community. There is a lot that you can do in this space alone. So investing in the spaces that want you, you know, so you can do that on the side while you're figuring out for these larger multilateral institutions, or institutions that are local, what is it that I need to gain? You need to, it's critical to put yourself first. I also like to say that if you do not have an idea about where you're going, believe you me, somebody will be happy to tell you where to go. And I promise you, wherever you're going was going to serve that person. So it's really, really critical that you come up with your own map. You have the vision for yourself. And I really also believe that whatever vision you have for yourself that has come from within is going to be the right next step. And you will probably gain a lot more than just taking some prescriptive stuff and banging at the door of the World Bank to let you in. What are the publication criteria for an economics project, and where can I upload it? Thanks so much for this program. Thank you, Oluyomi. So the publication criteria for an economics project, it depends. If you're working for a private organization, there is going to be a methodology that they have for publishing and their standards and their formatting and how they go about doing things. So if you look at things like McKinsey reports or other private consultancy agencies, you'll notice a pattern to how they report their projects. But that's something that you'll learn when you enter into that institution. Or sometimes a lot of these institutions like to see that you've been watching them, that you've been reading their stuff, and you already kind of write the way they do. But if you're talking about an academic economics project, that is a whole process. And the legitimacy of that comes from the peer review aspect. And that's going to come from your advisor, which is going to be like a professor, and then your committee. Thank you. Thank you. Also, emphasis on looking inward and designing African economy from our local community is new to me, from the perspective of commanding value. I'm glad that it's new, and just let it marinate and penetrate, see what comes up, see what it inspires. Especially if it's already resonating for you, you probably have been thinking like this, and exactly, we need spaces to discuss this. Again, I could go on about the importance of having different Black people together to discuss these commonalities and these approaches. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was invigorating. I'm a direct entry 200 level economics student, and I haven't gotten the niche. How do I navigate my career at this early stage? What skills and things are to be done to keep me on the right track and enhance my personal development? Thank you, Fashola. Yes. Thank you. So I haven't gotten the niche. One of the ways to get your niche is to be well read. So if you are at the 200 level, This is the time to read extensively. I've also gotten another like pro tip. I've gotten a lot of really interesting facts from footnotes. So from reading the document, from reading the text, and then checking their references or checking like the like little fun facts or the extra context in the footnotes, it might inspire something that is, you know, again, not the usual question, but something that is intriguing to you. And if it's intriguing to you, it's probably going to be intriguing to other people. So being well read and exposure, if you have the opportunity, anything that interests you that interfaces with economics, and most things interface with economics anyway. So I'm talking like even part of my research, because I'm thinking about what things have been devalued that actually have a lot of value. So like in the Nigerian context, our manufacturing our clothes, okay? These handmade clothes, that's considered couture in Europe, handmade clothes made to, you know, made specifically for a person. So we do that regularly. So that fashion is interfacing with economics, and therefore sometimes I'll like maybe I'll go to factories, or I'll talk with designers and I'll understand some of their cost constraints or what it's like for their production. Anything that is of interest. You're at that stage where you want a wide range of exposure. And then I'm going to give you another pro tip, which I was going to save for my the 4-week program that we're doing with you guys. But I will also say, read things and expose yourself to things that have seemingly nothing to do with economics. What this does when you start to become, because this is in essence becoming multidisciplinary, and again, in order to address overlapping existential interconnected problems, you should be multi or interdisciplinary. You can't only know economics if you want to accurately be able to give an interpretation. Like, you can't just sit in a library and then do a project on Uganda. You can't, if you want to really contribute something of weight, of substance. So read things that are seemingly like totally unrelated. One of the things that like really helped me in even developing this perspective was studying China and studying Mandarin. Seemingly unrelated, because I actually started with the language, and then I started getting into studying economic dynamics, literature, Chinese history, et cetera, et cetera. But all of these things have impacted even what I'm presenting to you, because one of the biggest findings that I've gotten from studying China is that you develop a development strategy based on your essence, on who you are, what you value. That's what they do. And oftentimes, like what you've seen, that whole miracle of raising 70 million people out of poverty in just like a couple of years, systematically, because they valued certain things in their society and they put a lot of emphasis on those things, even if it didn't make sense economically. But if they're like, oh, this town's going to get a job if we build this road over here and we're going to employ all these people, we're going to do it, even if the road leads to nowhere. That's why you see ghost cities in China. But you know what that city did do? It employed a lot of people. Okay. Ahmed, in our society today, knowledge of basic economics could help improve understanding of how our country works and increase demand for public service accountability. How can economists begin to simplify terminologies and theories for this purpose? Thank you. That means being able to write for a non-general audience. Yes, you do need to learn the language. So this is the thing. You need to learn these languages in order to interface within your academic community, and in order to be considered an economist. They want to see a regression. They want to see you using certain terms, but that's for your internal community. And that community, when you use these terms, that means you don't have to explain at length some ideas, because we all understand what the term is, and you can get feedback from other economists about your work and refine it. But here is the thing. In order to be, I think, an effective economist today, we live in the age now of YouTuberpreneurs. And some of these people, apparently the YouTube bubble is bursting. That's what I've read recently. But people have made money. Posting videos. Why? Because they're able to communicate things to a general audience. That goes to show, to Ahmed's question, how important it is as an academic today to actually be able to communicate. One of the things that happened when I first started my program, I was still very much in the Africa-China space, Deborah Brodingham, she's one of the lead scholars in the Africa-China, the China-Africa space. She's at Johns Hopkins SAIS, did a lot of work. She has an institute there. But she said, I remember I went for one of her workshops. She said that now, in order to get tenure, the way that your university assesses that is also your socials. Your socials. Yes. So there are so many ways to go about this. So for me, I really like doing fieldwork and research, but you can also have a presence on social media and be able to communicate these really critical ideas to people. That alone is making an impact, because what they're trying to essentially measure is how many people are you reaching with your ideas? Are people ingesting your ideas? Are you making it, it's kind of like being a public intellectual. Are you making your intellect known to the public and your expertise known to the public? What's the point of doing all this stuff if you're not able to share it with people? So that's a great question. I think some of the other questions disappeared, so sorry about that. But last I'm seeing is, I'm curious about the strong take and energy on Black history, Black role, Black performance, Black innovation by African Americans that seem irrelevant to their counterparts in the African continent. As upcoming African economists in Africa, is this something we want to pay attention to? Wow, that's a really, really wonderful question as well. I've loved all the questions. This is getting into a whole nother topic, but what I have learned and what I've observed, and also at my university, it's a layered, but to be concise, in the US is a bubble. It is a bubble. So there's a lot of things going on outside of the world that citizens are not aware of, because they're actually not that globally like oriented as much as like other countries are, even compared to the UK, not as globally oriented, because you're not from the Caribbean, you're Black. You're not from Zambia, you're Black, so these sort of nuances, but that's also because of the way that the society was constructed, and these labels and caste system was imposed and stuff. So is it something to pay attention to? To be honest, no. For me, I know, I'm sorry, but because most of the time, African Americans, the plight, just like in our countries, is so strong, and it's so bad. Largest incarceration rate in the world. I think it's 13% of the population in the US is Black, or maybe it's 6%. It is small, and yet most of the people incarcerated are Black people. So, these are that's just one of many things that African Americans are fighting. And so usually that connection to the global's Black struggle is not there. It's not my preference, but I think when it comes to having sympathy, yes, but in terms of that sort of collaboration, I'm not totally seeing it, but that's okay, because we have a whole continent and we have diasporans placed in these places. So that access to those resources that you would get from knowledge transfer channels or technology transfer channels that you would hope to get from, like, maybe an African American, you might get from your Ethiopian friend who's based in Minnesota. So it's, that's okay. Lastly, as a graduate student and aficionado of economics, what approach would you recommend upcoming African economists to take to study volumes like Walter Rodney, Claude Ake, Tom Burgess on economic development in Africa without being bored or distracted? Sometimes audiobooks are available. And the truth of the matter is, especially like when you're first starting your journey, immersion. You want to immerse yourself in the topic. So that means for me, videos, and thank God for YouTube. I didn't even use YouTube, and I don't think it was as popular when I was in college. But I use YouTube every single day today because it's a free education platform. So yeah, so videos, there's a lot of amazing lectures, and sometimes the lectures are more entertaining and they're fantastic synopsises of the books. So that can be like the starting place to get into it. And sometimes I like attending a lecture and then I go and reread that book, and then the same ideas in the lecture are there. Okay. And so yeah, audiobooks, lectures, videos, and then part of it too is, I don't know, I mean, this is just a reading technique, but annotating, taking notes. When I take notes, I usually try to relate back, okay, if this is a cool comment, how does it relate to one of the ideas I have been thinking of? And I can put that in the margin. And that's helpful because then when I go and I write, I can go back, flip through and find this was my interpretation of what this person said. And, you know, because again, the UK system is kind of that rote learning where I'm regurgitating the information back, or I'm giving you a synopsis of what everybody else has said. We need to know what you think. So that's where that personal reflection and the integration of the information and the processing of that information is a really critical skill. It's critical. It was critical before like 2020. 2020 is pretty much where the schism has happened, where now we're in this kind of new paradigm. But it's even more critical now to be able to interpret it yourself. So these are the skills that we need in order to be potent African economists or Afro economists that are asking questions that can move the needle. Okay.
Hi, Aisha. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending to all the questions. We have a lot more questions, but we're running out of time. That is why I had to like answer some of the questions online. They disappeared because we're already running out of time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So please, participants on the call, if you have more questions, you can direct them to AESP so that we send them to Aisha. Then you get your questions answered. We can't take more questions because of time. Thank you so much, Aisha, for your time. We really appreciate your presence on the call. And for participants, we are going to send the slides and the recording of the call to your emails. So be checking your emails constantly. For those asking about how to join AESP, we're going to give you a brief on that very soon. I'm going to call on Great, the founder, to talk about that and also give us a closing speech. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Aisha. Thank you so much for the session. It was really amazing. Like, it was inspiring, seriously. And it really went beyond expectations. I can see that from the chat as well. Thank you so much for the session. And just like Jennifer said, we are so sorry that we can't take all the questions. It's almost 2 hours since the webinar began. So we felt it was time to end. And as well, you can as well reach out to Aisha on LinkedIn. So her name on LinkedIn is still Aisha Udochi. You can connect with her on LinkedIn and even get to know more about her program as well, the Duffield, or you can even consult to duffield.org as well. All right, so thank you everyone once again for joining us. It's really been an amazing time, right? Getting to learn more about Africa. And I love the fact that Aisha went down the memory lane, trying to really help us understand the importance of coming from within. So I see a lot of questions on how to become a fellow of AESP. I think at this point, Aisha, do you mind if you could stop sharing your screen, perfect. So it is my delight to announce that application to join AESP, the program for this year, is open, right? So we are open right now. We're receiving applications, and you could just use the link you can see on the screen. And as well, you can check our social media pages. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter. Check out to see the link as well. You would see it in a couple of places, even on a couple of WhatsApp platforms as well. So we are delighted to receive your applications. This year, we are spreading our tentacles to receive applications. Last year, we had just scholars from Nigeria, but this year we're expanding our tentacles a bit, right, to receive applications from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, or South Africa. Sincere apologies if you don't see your country yet. It's because we are trying to expand slowly. We don't want to take something that we won't be able to cover, right, because we just started last year. So we hope that in subsequent years, we would be able to, accept applications from a couple of other African countries. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Please do want to follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn. We also hope to have more webinars like this where we get to talk about Africans and the economic landscape of Africa as well. And finally, I also want to say thank you so much again to Aisha, because the process of having this webinar was very, very, very smooth. Aisha made it very smooth. And yeah, you could see her passion and her drive about Africa. It seems like the webinar wasn't going to end. And that was really something I enjoyed about it. Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening or day, depending on where you're joining us from. Bye.